So there's a recent report coming from the Kiev Times that the real Putin has not appeared in public since the Wagner mutiny. And this just kind of goes back. Putin is famously paranoid. We saw him during COVID, covered up. So there's a recent report coming, keeping people at arm's length. He looks very different in media pictures than he's ever looked before. I thought it was just all due to plastic surgery, but it just makes sense at this point that this guy is using a lot of body doubles. So, do you think this is the case? Do you think the Putin that we're seeing in the media is not really Putin?
Well, so this is where we have to be honest with our listeners, viewers, that we are speculating.
Right? Yeah, of course.
No, okay. But, a lot of what we talk about, I like to feel like I've got a pretty good grounds for saying.
Yeah.
Here, the only thing I have really good grounds to say is, I don't know, but it's beginning to seem that way. And let me try to lay out the argument. The argument is, in particular, that after this failed coup, Putin went to, I forgot what the city was, and did a walkabout, right? One of these things where you surprise the man on the street and you walk around the streets and shake people's hand and kiss babies. All this stuff that politicians around the world typically do. But Putin, as you point out, has been notoriously germphobic to the point where he has met these foreign leaders at the end of 20-foot-long tables and stuff like this, and we all had a good laugh at it. So the question is, how does this notoriously germ-phobic and, of course, security-phobic person suddenly find himself walking around among these crowds? And the argument was, well, this isn't really Putin. This is one of his doubles. So then you begin to hear these things like, well, actually, there's three doubles. Does that make them doubles? I guess.
Triples, yeah.
Whatever, and so on and so forth. And it seems to me fairly likely that that's the case.
Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
And when I say fairly likely, it's because it doesn't involve some crazy conspiracy. It involves what a fairly commonsensical person might do.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
If I was Putin, I mean, I'm not the paranoid dictator, but I would not be confident stepping out in public. I mean, exactly. Right? I mean, the guy can be taken. He especially as a person who takes out people left and right. He must have an idea of what could potentially be coming for him. Yeah. And I can't imagine, especially like out amongst the crowds. And I was even thinking about, all these crazy media pictures, and hopefully I'll throw one up here, but of him sitting, 20 feet away from his people. Yeah. Maybe that's so they can't even realize they're not even sitting in front of Putin, right?
Well, okay. So this gets us into, something that was speculated in that Kiev Post article, which I think sort of crosses from there's something strange going on here to out and out conspiracy theory, which I think is not plausible, which is this idea that there is actually no Putin. The whole thing is kind of made up, right? There's always been three Putins. The problem with that is it raises this question of who's the puppet master?
Is there the shadow government in place? I don't think so.
What I do think, so I don't think that's plausible at all. But for this last week, right, you sort of say which is more plausible, that this notoriously germ-phobic Putin is suddenly so interested in kind of showing everybody that things are normal and things are fine that he suddenly decided he's not afraid of catching germs anymore, or that he just sent out somebody who looks a lot like him to do the thing. I would say, both of those seem implausible, but I guess the body double one is as plausible as this Putin suddenly getting unafraid of germs.
And there's some reports out there, Putin being ill, having this twitch, not looking the same. I mean, it's I think it's very reasonable to assume he is likely using body doubles. I don't know the scale of which he's using these body doubles.
So let me sort of push a little bit further without hopefully going too far into the realm of just out and out rabbit hole conspiracy theory stuff, which I don't believe in. Years ago, when a guy called Alan Greenspan was the chair of the Federal Reserve Board of the United States, and this was before he turned out to have turned the economy into a disaster, the bubble of 2008. It was when the bubble was still inflating, and we all thought he was a genius. And somebody asked some member of Congress, what are we going to do if Greenspan dies? Because he's kind of become the embodiment of running the economy effectively. And somebody said, we're just going to put dark glasses on him and prop him up in his chair.
Weekend at Bernie style.
Exactly. I think that was kind of the joke. But, I can certainly imagine that if and when Putin dies, which he will die sooner or later, you could imagine some period while people behind the scenes are trying to figure out what they're going to do, that they try to not let the world know that he's dead yet, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you could get a little bit of a fake Putin there.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that's not too atypical. There's always like, yeah, we're going to get this done, and then make sure the vice president is in the right place, get the vice, sworn in, and so on, and then you announce that the president's dead.
Yeah.
This kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think when you start getting into things like artificial intelligence, it really does.
Oh no.
Yeah. Well, so since
I'm just thinking AI Putin is not what we want in a recreation of
well,
this.
I'm not thinking AI Putin, but I'm thinking of the Dread Pirate Roberts. If you know what I'm referring to.
Yeah, Princess Bride.
The Princess Bride, which is another great study on political power, by the way. For those of you who don't know, very basically the idea is that there's this Dread Pirate Robert, and everybody's just afraid of him, and his power is in the fact that everybody's afraid of him. But every so often, this guy gets tired of doing it, and so he just picks somebody else to replace him, kills everybody who knows what he looks like, and then the new guy gets the benefit of all that fear. And you can sort of imagine kind of, I don't know, Big Brother, George Orwell style, some regime that goes on for decades and decades and decades, right, with the same leader because the leader is just...
Isn't North Korea essentially a version of this? I mean, they've kind of made one of the Kim Jongs kind of this messiah figure, and then the progeny is just a thing, but maybe not at this level.
I almost might also equate it to any of these hereditary monarchies. Where it's just like, yeah, it's the king is the king is the king. The king is dead. Long live the king. It doesn't matter who the person is, right? All that matters is they get the hardware on their head and the thing to hold in their hand, and everybody does what they say.
Yeah. A military intelligence official, this is quoted by the Kiev Post, we are aware of at least 3 lookalikes being used. Their true identities have not yet been established. Putin's appearance is quite typical and ordinary for the use of this technology. Putin's last trip to Dagestan was definitely by a double. So, so that could be the case. We don't know. So I guess it remains to be seen, but it is certainly something of interest, I would say.
So can we dig a little bit more into a slightly different conspiracy theory here?
Sure. Yes, of course.
So this line from the Kiev Post, it's like, well, is that the real best analysis of the Ukrainian intelligence agency? Or is that their way of kind of trying to tweak the Russians a little bit and make the Russians start wondering, right, whether they're actually dealing with Putin? The reason I point that out is that one of the things that's happened this past week, at the same time as all this was going on, is the New York Times released a story saying that they had been leaked from American intelligence that this guy, this General Surovikin, had been sort of co-conspiring with Prigozhin in this plot. And I sort of take it at face value that, well, that must be what the United States intelligence found. But I also thought it would be really clever, right, for the U.S. intelligence to start casting doubt on these different Russian generals as a way of getting Putin to think, who can I trust, right? Or getting him to take out his most competent generals because he doesn't trust them. And he may not even trust his own intelligence people to tell them as much as the CIA is leaking in the New York Times, because the CIA is notoriously leak prone. So it's a trick.
Now I'm worried about, are we going to start seeing Biden doubles or Trump doubles in the United States?
One wants to make jokes, but I don't think we're there yet, and I don't think there's any real purpose for it. That is to say,
yeah, thank God.
Yeah, there's no real purpose for it. But so Woodrow Wilson, right, a century ago, Woodrow Wilson had a stroke and was basically not functioning for the last, I don't know, year, 2 years of his presidency. And his advisors basically took care of everything, and his wife made a lot of apparently very important decisions. And so, this is a really interesting question with an elderly president, which is, as some future president begins to slip, or in the case of some past president, maybe was not compos mentis to begin with, to what extent do people around him begin to say, this is what we're doing, and yeah, don't worry, the president is fine with it? We already know this happened in the Trump administration, right? And we talked about this in our last meeting. The idea that, I think there was sort of an agreement among the top generals that if Trump says, we're nuking this country or nuking that country, don't do it. So there's all.
Not only that, even Reagan was potentially thought to have early onset Alzheimer's towards the end of his administration, right?
I think there's, again, it's impossible to know without a diagnosis, but he later did have Alzheimer's, and so you don't know when it started.
Yeah. Well, very, very interesting. Right. We'll keep on top of this. The fake Putins, the AI Putins, which we don't want. But man, this world is going to get interesting.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
All right. Thank you, Paul.